All right, guys, we are back in my garage for another video. And yes, I tuned my big turbo 440 on an OEM B58 fuel setup. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm still here to tell the tale. No, the engine never blew up. It never leaned out. And yes, it made pretty good power. And so I think I see a lot of people talking about this option or saying that they're interested in going this route to save some money. And while I don't necessarily recommend it, I think that there are also a lot of misguided comments saying that this is going to cause a catastrophic issue, and I want to explain why that's not really the case. So from personal experience, I'm going to tell you guys my story. Let's go ahead and talk about it, and hopefully you guys find this video useful. Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future. So for reference, let's talk about my car. It is a 2018 BMW 440i. It is rear-wheel drive with a 6-speed manual transmission. So for anybody that's wondering what kind of times it runs or why they're not hearing about me breaking records and all this stuff, that should basically tell you the story. There's no reason for me to go racing my car in a lot of cases. Compared to an all-wheel drive automatic transmission car, it's just significantly slower. Still plenty of fun, still makes good power, but the numbers aren't going to correlate to a lot of what you see out there on the internet. But that being said, I still wanted to have more fun, so I got a big turbo kit. And this is the OG Doc Race turbo kit. Some of you might remember back in 2020, they released this kit. So I bought it and installed it on my car over the winter, and I've had it installed since then. So going on a little over 4 years now. And it is the kit that uses an EFR turbo with an internal wastegate. So it actually allowed you to retrofit the stock electronic wastegate and control it like completely factory. So yes, even beyond what we're talking about today, tuning your car on a stock fuel system, I could run this on a completely stock tune and it would run without an issue. And that was really nice to have at the time because we didn't have the capability to bypass all of the errors that would come with trying to use an external wastegate. So that's the setup I have. It's running an EFR 8374 turbo. It's capable of 750 horsepower, at least from the ratings. That's what it's rated for. And then I tuned it on an OEM fuel system. Now, I specify OEM fuel system because at the time I did have a TU pump. So it is an OEM kind of B58 setup. It had stock injectors, stock fuel lines, all of that stuff. But I did have a TU pump at the time because I had been testing that originally. But for anybody that's been here for a while, you know I've been testing a lot of stuff for a while, and that was a part of the process I wanted to go down. So at the time, I think the Dorch Stage 2 high pressure fuel pump had been out for about 6 months, maybe close to a year, and the Spool FX180 had also been out for a little over 6 months or so. So I just wanted to try things on the TU pump before I jumped into, testing out those newer upgrades as well. So that's what we did. I got the car tuned by Odin Tuned, and starting off, we just got the car tuned on pump gas. I got some draggy numbers and things. And comparing my car before and after going from stock turbo to the upgraded turbo, it was making similar power to what the car would do on an ethanol mix on stock turbo, but with the upgraded turbo on pump gas. And that's usually what I tell people you should expect. If you tune the car on 93, it's probably going to make similar performance figures to what you were getting on a stock turbo with an E40 or E50 mix. So that was great. I never dynoed the car, I don't think, but once I actually got it tuned on E85, I wanted to see how far we could push it. And so we ended up tuning the car on E35, and I did make a video on this setup where I took it to the dyno and measured how much power it was making, and it made 590 wheel horsepower. Now, do I think this is an anomaly? Do I think this was just a glory run? Well, let's get into the details here. So everything on your car has a limit. I think that's pretty much a given, but a lot of people underestimate how easy it is to keep your car within those limits if you just tune it properly. And that's basically what we focused on during the development of my car. When we put the big turbo setup on it, we tested a bunch of different ethanol mixes on the off-the-shelf maps at the time. Our stock turbo tunes were targeting E30. A lot of people, when they went to upgraded turbos, went to E50. So we tested various mixes, and that's how we ended up on E35. So That was very specific to my setup and our tuning to figure out what the optimal mix was. If we tuned it on more ethanol, we'd have to drop boost. And yes, we could add more timing, but it would make less power. And the same but opposite was the case if we went lower in ethanol. If we went to E30 or E25, we were able to run more boost, but by dropping timing, we made less power. So targeted E35 and got everything dialed in to hit that 590 wheel horsepower figure. But the other thing, and I think the more important thing to understand, is that when you're tuning your car on a stock fuel setup, you're only using DI. And DI gets more fuel capacity as you get higher in the rev range. So at 7,000 RPM, you have twice as much fuel available as you do at 3,500 RPM. Now, if you're pushing your car on an ethanol mix on a stock turbo, it's going to make a lot of torque in the mid-range, but up top it's going to drop out and you're going to miss out on some of the available fuel, which means you're not making the maximum amount of power that you could towards redline. And you'll see a lot of these really fast stock turbo cars shift very early. I think I showed you guys in a previous video on my car when I was testing on the stock turbo, shifting around 6,000 RPM gave me the best performance. So if you upgrade the turbo with an otherwise OEM fuel setup, you're going to have a lot of fuel capacity that you can take advantage of above 6,000 RPM where your big turbo continues to flow air. So that's where I think a lot of my gains came from, and that's why I was able to make so much power with just a TU pump, a combination of blending the right ethanol mix with a big turbo that can use the entire fuel range is going to make sure that you can, make even more power with a relatively simple setup. Now, as you can see from the dyno chart, it made 590 right at the very end. We were literally tracing the fuel capacity all the way across the rev range, and that's why it looks almost like a naturally aspirated car's dyno. It's not giving you that super wide power band that you might typically see with a turbo setup. So it made the power figure, but yes, if there was more fuel capacity down low with port injection or a higher flowing fuel pump, I would be able to make that power across a wider rev range. But again, in this case, it was more about testing and just seeing what was possible with this setup. The other thing is the car was on relatively low boost. It was only making around peak of 23 PSI. I think it started around 19 or 20 in the mid-range and then slowly ramped up as we went towards redline. And that was very deliberate, again, to work within our fuel capacity and make sure that the tune was safe. And I think the easiest way to kind of illustrate this is if you're on a completely stock setup, especially for the Gen 1 guys, your car runs fine. It's making 10, maybe 12 PSI, depending on the OEM tune. If you tune it stage 1 or stage 2, it might bump it up to like 16 or so PSI, and it runs without an issue. But if you install a TU pump or a Dorch pump, you can run higher boost levels, which makes more power. Now, that doesn't mean that the car is a ticking time bomb when it's running on those lower boost levels on a stock high pressure fuel pump setup. You just know that when you add a bigger fuel pump, you can turn up the boost even more. And that's the exact same case with a stock fuel system. That's why my testing demonstrates that yes, your car can run on a stock fuel system with an upgraded turbo without blowing up if you have a tune to set it up for that. That's the only thing that's critical here to make this all work. It's the same thing as my argument for why a car can run full E85 on a stock fuel system. If you have a tune that's designed to make it work safely, you won't have any issues. And I drove my car like that all summer. I was racing and doing draggy runs and other testing until eventually, yes, I got a Dorch Stage 2 and then I added port injection and the rest was history after that. But I had a lot of fun with that setup, running it on an OEM fuel system, on a perfect ethanol mix that worked with everything to give me a safe amount of power and make the car nice and consistent. Now, probably the bigger question is, do I recommend it? And I would say not necessarily. And there are a couple of reasons why. No, I'm not on the camp that says that it's just not worth it and it won't make any more power. Obviously in my case, it made much more power than the stock turbo would for the reasons that I gave you. If you're able to run a turbo that can use up that extra fuel capacity up top, it'll be more fun, it will be faster, and you can enjoy it until you save up more money for the other mods. My argument has always been a big turbo that is designed to use up the capacity of fuel and air and everything that you have is going to be more fun than running a stock turbo that runs out of steam really quickly and running it all the way at its limit to try to get as much as possible out of a fuel system that's made for 1,000 horsepower or whatever. But I will say that this is all depending on your goals. That is always the starting point. Anybody that asks me what turbo is best, what fuel setup is best, this and that, that I always come back with the same question. What are your goals? How much power do you want to make? What kind of times do you want to run? Is it designed for quarter mile racing or draggy racing, roll racing, road racing? Are you just looking to beat your friend? Whatever the case is, the first step is to figure out what your goals are and then build your car around those goals. If you want your car to make 600 wheel horsepower, I am not going to tell you to run it with a stock fuel setup, because the stock fuel setup isn't going to get you there. If you want to be able to make as much power as you can on pump gas, now we can talk about it. Maybe a TU pump is more than enough to hit those limits because you don't have E85 available, or you plan on adding meth injection or something else. So there are a lot of different ways that you can accomplish these results. It really just depends on what you want to do, how much you want to spend, what kind of fuel you want to run. All of those details are what you need to figure out in order to plan out your build. Until you figure that out, then there's no point in choosing anything to pick out your path for your build. Now, I will say what I accomplished is relatively conservative for what most people's goals are. So that's why I tell a lot of people it's probably not worth it for what you're trying to achieve. But yes, I mean, if I was just going to be running pump gas, I would still just have a TU pump and a OEM fuel setup, and the car would be perfectly fine. So that's why it's really up to you to kind of determine how far you want to go first. And the other thing is, it did take a really long time to dial in the tune, because like I said, we were testing different ethanol mixes and kind of chasing the limits of our fuel system throughout the rev range. And yes, it was safe. Yes, the logs were fine. But if I messed up my fuel mix, I would have had issues. This was before we had flex fuel capability. So I was measuring at the pump, testing my ethanol mix and getting it exactly right to make sure that everything was safe. But if it was at E37 or E38, I'd start getting fuel pressure dips. If it was at E31 or E32, I'd start getting timing corrections. And I think total, it took us almost 30 revisions to get everything dialed in. For a 590 wheel horsepower map, that's probably a lot more work than a lot of you want to put in. So that's why a lot of people will recommend just getting a little bit extra fuel capacity and just making it a lot easier on you and your tuner to accomplish these results. And that's really kind of, again, up to you to determine with your tuner and your budget what the best route would be. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to make this video because I am not on the bandwagon that says your fuel system needs to be able to support twice as much power. At the end of the day, your car can only adjust so much anyway. The most important thing is to have a tune that is set up for your car to do what you want it to do. If your tune isn't safe, you could have a fuel setup that's capable of twice as much power and it's still going to lean out because the tune isn't dialed in right. That's the most critical thing, to make sure that all of it works together in harmony. And that's why, again, I recommend figuring out what you want your car to do, building your car around those goals, find a tuner that can help you achieve those results, and then go down that path of building your car. Otherwise, you're not going to have a good time. So yeah, hopefully this answers your questions. And if you guys are planning on building your car, hopefully I post this video before Black Friday. I'm not really sure when this is going live since I film all my videos in advance. But if you haven't, check out my Black Friday video. And hopefully this is during that time where you guys can start buying parts and getting stuff ready for your build, so your car will be even faster next year. But otherwise, I think that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.